Welcome back to the channel everyone, my name is Josh and in today's video I'm going to show you how easy it is to actually deploy a .NET Core Web API to Lambda within AWS. So what we're going to do then, just to get started, let's go ahead and we're going to create a new Web API, because I just want to show you how easy it is to actually deploy something from scratch to Lambda. So if we just go ahead and hit .NET Core Web API, and we'll just call this example light, because it's going to be a super light API, we're not going to touch anything with this at all. So what we're going to do then is we're just going to go to our example light folder here, and we're going to go manage NuGet packages, and then in here we'll just type in Lambda hosting, and you'll see here this is the one we want. It's amazon.lambda ASP.NET Core server.hosting. It's currently got over 4 million downloads. Let's go ahead and install this and hit apply and hit I accept. And then in our program.cs we can then simply just say builder.services add Lambda hosting, and then within here we can pass in a Lambda source, and you can use REST API, but we're going to use HTTP API. Doesn't really make a difference, it's just what the function handler and the function URLs use under the hood within Lambda, so that's where we're going to put HTTP API. And then we can actually now deploy this. Now if you haven't already configured your AWS machine, well your machine, to authenticate with AWS, you'll need to do that first. I have already covered this in another video, how to install the command line interface within AWS, so go ahead and watch that video first and then come back to this one. Okay, so before we actually deploy this to AWS, what we need to do is let's go to our example light application. We'll hit add, no, not manage NuGet packages. We'll hit add, and then here we can do new item. Let's just do a text. Might actually be a JSON in here because it is JSON we want to do. There you go, JSON file. And the file we want to call this is aws-lambda-tools-default. So let's go ahead and create that. And I'm just going to paste in an example here from another one, says typing it out. And instead of to-do list API, we'll just call this example light. So this is what our function is going to be called. And then we also need a function handler, or said that the other way around, but we've put that in there. We'll just put it as exactly the same. We've got a couple of things here. So our configuration is going to be release. Our runtime is .NET 8. And memory size is 256 megabytes. Obviously, be careful how much memory you do put in here, because you will get charged for that. A timeout, so if we time out for whatever reason, we'll just end after 30 seconds. And then another benefit to kind of keep an eye on is this function URL enable. So we're going to be using the function URLs within Lambda. That's why we've set this to true. So now we've done that, we can go to our terminal. And we want to make sure we're in the root. So if we look at our solution here, we have a blank solution Lambda API, and then an example light .NET Core API. So within here, we're in the root, because you can see we're in this example light. We can just type in .NET Lambda deploy function. And now what this is going to do, it's going to look at our defaults file here and pull in some of the details that it can automatically, but some things it might need our help on. So let's just give it a couple of seconds to do this. So you can see it's going to create a new Lambda function. It needs an IAM role to kind of do this. So let's go ahead and hit 2. It's going to create a new role. Let's enter the name of this. So our function is called example light. So we'll just say example light role. And then it's going to want a policy. Now you can select any one of these. We're just going to go for number 4, which is the basic execution role. Sometimes this can change with versions. So if you saw me use 4, it might be that it's number 5 in yours, or number 6. So just go with the AWS Lambda basic execution role. Let's hit number 4. And now this is going to propagate across all of the regions within AWS. So it'll take a couple of seconds. And then after this, we should, because we've got this function URL enable set to true, we should have this now straight away within Lambda. And we'll just give it a couple more seconds and then we'll go and check that out. So we can see that's done. New Lambda created, and there's our function URL. So if we click that on here and just say weather forecast, there you go, we get all of our data, and that is now completely deployed serverless in AWS Lambda. Now that was very quick. Now you'll always hear people talk about cold starts within Lambda. So what that is because it's serverless, every time you send a request, Lambda will need to set up an execution environment to handle that request, and especially within .NET and within Windows, that can take up to a second, 2 seconds. It depends how heavy your startup is. So if you're registering a DB context, loads of services, loads of dependency injection, it's going to slow that down drastically. So that is one of the main caveats with hosting .NET in Lambda. You can work around this, you can optimize your startup, you can use AOT, which is ahead of time. That does take away a lot of that bloat. You can also enable something called provision concurrency within Lambda. So what that means is you can set that to like 5, and AWS and Lambda will keep 5 instances warm So when a request goes to your server, it'll use a warm state instead of a cold state, meaning it's a lot faster and you don't have to wait that 1 or 2 second cold start. So this is a very basic AWS function. You can see, again, everything's within here. So we can see we have our configuration, we have our 256 megabytes of memory, our 30-second timeout. We can see our function URL, which has got created automatically because of our function URL enable parameter there. So let's go ahead and do things a little bit more complicated. So let's come out of this for a second and we'll close down of this. And what we're actually going to do is we're going to go to our terminal and we're just going to clear. And I'm going to go back a root. So I'm now in my root directory. And I want to go into this DynamoDB example. Now, this is a very crude API. I've not really followed best practices by any means. I don't copy this kind of word for word if you're looking to integrate with DynamoDB. But it's essentially just a minimal API. What we're doing is we register a new singleton. We declare a table name, which is in DynamoDB called customers. And then we have a few endpoints. So we have a create, a get, and a delete. And then we just have a model of what our customer looks like. So if we just go ahead and run this, excuse me, and if we just go to Postman, we can hit create. So we on a local host, just to kind of prove what this API is doing, we can hit create. This is going to create us a new user. So there you go. We've got this ID. We can then use the get endpoint to actually get that user. And if we go ahead and look in our DynamoDB, just to prove that this is actually saving to a database. So if we go DynamoDB, tables, customers, explore items, you can see here we have this customer, which is our matching ID. And then again, we can use that endpoint, that same API to delete. So this is a bit more of an advanced in some aspects API. We can then go back to the get and the get won't work. And then we can also go back to DynamoDB. And if we refresh, we have no items because we deleted it via that endpoint. So again, this is a bit more advanced now because what we're actually doing is we're talking to other services within AWS. So our Lambda will actually need to be able to authenticate with that. So we're going to do exactly the same. So let's come out of this and let's just stop debugging. And my recording software is yet again in the way. So let's just quickly, come on, stop debugging. And what we can then do is go to our DynamoDB example. We'll need to manage NuGet packages. And again, we need to type in Lambda hosting. We're going to install this on our API. And we'll hit apply. And we'll hit I accept. And then what we'll do from here, we'll go to our program.cs. And at the very top, just before we build, we'll need to say builder services, add Lambda hosting. And then within here, Lambda event source, HTTP API. There you go. Again, we're ready now. So let's go ahead and just copy another JSON file. So let's go to add new item. We want to do a JSON file. JSON file, JSON file, JSON file. JSON file, there it is, hiding from me. Paste in our file name there, and we're just going to go ahead and paste in this again. And instead of to-do list API, we'll call this DynamoDB example. That's our handler. Our function name will be the same. And again, function URL enable is going to be enabled as well. Let's go ahead and save this. Back to our terminal. We're in the root of DynamoDB example. So let's just type in .NET Lambda deploy function. And this is going to deploy it again, just like it did with the very lightweight API. And what we can then do is this is going to create a new one. So what do we want to do? Let's go ahead and create a new role. So we'll do number 3. And then we'll need a name. So let's just say DynamoDB example underscore role. We need a policy. Again, I'm just going to go ahead and use the basic execution role. Let's go ahead and hit number 4. And now this is going to propagate across all of the regions within AWS. And again, in a couple of minutes, this is going to give us a URL that we can actually use to authenticate and actually use our API with DynamoDB in Lambda. So let's give that a couple of seconds. That's now done. We have our function URL, so let's go ahead and click that. And then again, it's not going to work because there's nothing on the root. But if we now go to Postman, and instead of localhost, we can change all of our endpoints to actually go to the AWS version. So again, get rid of localhost. That's fine. And then delete get rid of local host. That is fine. So now if we actually call the create and we hit send, this is actually going to error. Now, why is it going to error? Well, we're going to notice two things actually. One, it took a lot longer because that's that whole cold start that I mentioned. So it's going to take a couple of seconds just to actually initialize that warm instance because we're actually doing things now like talking to DynamoDB. And the second thing is that we've got a 500 internal error. So why did we get a 500 internal error? And it's basically because what I said is our Lambda can't actually communicate to DynamoDB because it doesn't have the permissions to do so. So if we go to our DynamoDB example, we can look at configuration. And well, first of all, you could actually go to, if you wasn't sure why it wasn't working, if we just go to CloudWatch. CloudWatch is where you can view all your log files. And then within here, if we go to log groups, you'll see you should have a folder called DynamoDB example or whatever your project is called. We can go to our log streams. And if we look into here, we should see an error somewhere that basically says we don't have the permissions. You can see here, DynamoDB exception, the user is not authorized to perform the put item request on the resource. So how do we give our Lambda access to actually perform that resource and that request? So let's go back to Lambda. Let's go into our DynamoDB example. And if we go to permissions here, you'll see we have a role name called DynamoDB example underscore role, which is what we created through the terminal. Let's hit that. And then what we can do is we can go to where we're under permissions. You just at the minute we have this basic execution role. So we can just go to add permissions, create inline policy. And then this is the policy editor. So from within here, we can kind of set up what we want to have our Lambda have access to. So in this case, we're using DynamoDB, so we can type in DynamoDB. But if we were using something like secrets manager, whether that's SES, RDS, NSS3, whatever it is, you'll always have to give it permission to access that resource and that service within AWS. So we're in Dynamo, so let's type in DynamoDB. And then in access level, we need to basically tell it what it can do. So can it do read? Can it do write? Can it do everything else? Just for tutorial purposes, I'm just going to hit allow all DynamoDB actions. Don't do this in production. Actually go into what you need and tick. So actually we'll do it properly. So we don't really care about backups. So we don't care. You'd come in here. So what do we actually need in this example? So we want a get item. We probably want a well, let's actually look at the code. So we can see that we do, so we're doing a put item, we do a get item, and we do a delete item. So let's go back to the policy. So we've got get item, we can do, so this is all read. So then we can go to write, which is delete item, update item, was it update item or was it, we've got delete, we do get item and put item. Let's just go and look for put item, which is there. And then again, if we just hit next, we'll do all tables. You can do specific tables if you really want to, but we'll just say all. And then if we just come back up here, just double check everything. This is all set to allow. So we have get item, delete, update, put, which is fine. Let's hit next. Let's give this a name. We'll just say this, call this DynamoDB access and hit create policy. And then perfect. So this now does have access. So if we go back to Postman and if we hit our create again, this should now work this time because it has access, and it does. We can see here we've got a customer back. So there's our write access. We can do a get. Let's go ahead and set that endpoint there. And you can see that returned our data. If we go and actually look at DynamoDB, within that resource, we should now see this ID as well. So if we say explore items, we are in Virginia for some reason. Let's go back to London. And then if we go explore items, customers, we can see we have that ID there, which is a match. Now let's go ahead and delete that using Postman. Let's hit delete, put in our GUID, hit send. It's sent that request. Let's just confirm that the get endpoint no longer works because obviously that record doesn't exist. And if we go back to DynamoDB and refresh, we can see our item has gone because it's now been deleted. So if we want to push another update now, let's say we've worked on a feature, we want to push that back to Lambda. What is that process? So that process, and again, this is why the this default file is really useful, because every time you run that command, especially if you're not doing it in like a CI/CD way, is you'd have to fill out all this information in like a multi-step. So every time you run that AWS.NET deploy Lambda function, it would ask you all of these questions. It would say, what's your environment? What's your memory size? What's your timeout? So this file really comes in handy. So let's just go to our program.cs, for instance, and let's just create a new endpoint here. Just say, welcome to ASP.NET Core running on Lambda. And then if we go back to our terminal, we can just run that same command, .NET Lambda deploy function. So now that's been deployed, what we can do is we can hit that endpoint. And now because we actually have a get endpoint, we now actually get a message saying, welcome to ASP.NET Core on Lambda. And again, if we wanted to change that, and now let's say we are now on version 2, we could run that again, go .NET deploy function. This is going to deploy again to Lambda. It's zipping all our artifacts up, create a new version, updated code. If we now hit that URL, we should now get version 2. So there you go, everyone. That's how easy it is to actually deploy a .NET Core Web API to Lambda within AWS. And again, pretty much it was just this one line of code that does all that for us. So it's really helpful, really cheap as well, especially if you want to move into that cloud computing and the serverless architecture. It's really good. Again, the only thing to really caveat is bear in mind is that cold start can impact you, and it might end up with a bad user experience if you're having to wait 1 or 2 seconds for that instance to warm up. But that is it for this video. If you did learn something from it, or if you did enjoy this video, then please do drop a like rating on the video or subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all next time.